My life was a collection of well-maintained routines. At 32, I, Leo Vance, was the operations supervisor for the Verdant Valley Botanical Gardens. I managed irrigation schedules, soil composition reports, and the temperamental moods of a 50-year-old greenhouse boiler. My apartment was minimalist not by design, but by a lack of imagination. My social life was a quiet, predictable orbit around a few trusted friends. It was a life built on caution, a fortress of predictability I had constructed brick by boring brick after Chloe left. Chloe, my last significant relationship, had ended not with a bang, but with a sigh of polite resignation. "You're just," said old Leo, she'd said over a perfectly adequate but uninspired dinner I'd made. "You're like a beautiful, well-maintained hedge. It's nice to look at, and I know it will always be there, but it never really grows." She wanted a wildflower, something untamed. I was a boxwood. We parted amicably, a quiet, surgical removal that left a neat, clean wound. But the scar tissue that grew over it was a constant, dull ache of inadequacy. I wasn't just boring to her. I had become boring to myself. I had mistaken emotional caution for wisdom, and in doing so, I had put my own heart into a state of managed dormancy. Then Maya blew through my carefully curated quiet like a summer storm. She didn't call. She never did. Her arrival was announced by 3 frantic knocks on my door, a pattern so uniquely hers, impatient, energetic, and slightly offbeat, that I knew it was her before I even turned the deadbolt. I opened the door to find her standing in the hallway, a whirlwind of nervous energy contained in a deceptively calm package. "I need your help," she said, bypassing any greeting and marching straight into my living room. She began pacing, a habit she had when her brain was moving faster than her feet could keep up. "It's an emergency. A level 4, possibly level 5, social catastrophe in the making." Maya was a graphic designer, a woman who thought in color palettes and sharp lines, and she applied the same dramatic intensity to her personal life. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Level 5 is asteroid hurtling towards Earth. Is an asteroid hurtling towards Earth, Maya?" "Worse," she declared, stopping to face me. "I have a date." I waited. She had dates. This wasn't news. This wasn't even a level 1 emergency, which was usually reserved for running out of her favorite brand of coffee. She must have read the skepticism on my face because she threw her hands up in exasperation. "Not just any date, Leo. It's with Mark, the architect, the one who volunteers at the animal shelter and has kind eyes." Ah, the legendary kind-eyed Mark. I thought he was a myth, like a unicorn that can file its own taxes. "He's real," she insisted, her voice dropping. "And he's nice, really nice. And I think I might actually genuinely like him." She wrung her hands, a gesture so un-Maya-like it set off a small alarm in my chest. Maya was the confident one, the one who navigated the world with a witty retort and an unshakable sense of self. This version of her, fretting, uncertain, was a rare and disconcerting sight. "Okay," I said slowly, pushing off the doorframe and walking towards her. "So you like him? He likes you. He asked you out. I'm failing to see the catastrophe." She took a deep breath, her eyes darting around my living room, landing on everything but me. "The thing is, Julian," just his name was enough to curdle the air. Julian was her ex, a man whose personality was as slick and synthetic as his overpriced leather jacket. He'd spent their entire 2-year relationship subtly chipping away at her confidence, disguising his control as sophisticated taste. He criticized her clothes, her friends, her laugh. He had been a master of the backhanded compliment, the kind that made you feel small and grateful at the same time. "What about him?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. "He was critical," she said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes, usually a warm, sparkling brown, were clouded with old insecurities. "About everything, but especially." She made a vague, circular motion with her hand. "I did not, in fact, no. Your hand-gesturing skills." "No, you idiot," she said, a flash of her usual fire returning. "Kissing. He was always critiquing. Too much this, not enough that he made it feel like a performance I was constantly failing. The thought of that condescending prick making Maya feel anything less than perfect sent a hot spike of anger through me. I kept my face neutral. Julian is an arrogant fool whose opinion is worth less than the gum on my shoe. Logically, I know that, she said, her shoulders slumping. But emotionally, the critique is still rattling around in my head. And Mark has those kind eyes, and I don't want to be in my head if he kisses me. I want to be present, not worrying about my technique. She said the word with such disdain, it was almost a hiss. I saw where this was going. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, the space between us charged with an unspoken, terrifying request. My carefully managed dormancy was about to be hit with a defibrillator. So, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, her gaze locked on mine, direct and unwavering. I need practice. I just stared at her. My brain, usually so adept at logistics and problem-solving, was a blue screen of death. All systems had crashed. Practice, I repeated, my voice flat. Yes, with a trusted friend. Someone safe. Someone who won't make it weird. She took a step closer. I need you to teach me how to kiss, Leo. Or, not teach me exactly. Just help me get out of my own head. A dry run. A calibration. A calibration. She was talking about kissing like it was an irrigation sensor. I felt a hysterical laugh bubble up in my chest, but I choked it down. She was dead serious. Her vulnerability was a raw, open thing in the middle of my sterile living room. She trusted me. She saw me as safe, the very quality Chloe had found so damning. For Maya, it was a compliment. For me, it was a complicated, painful, and strangely thrilling brand of torture. I looked at her, really looked at her. Maya wasn't just my best friend. She was a fixed point in my universe. I saw the faint constellation of freckles across her nose that only appeared in the summer. I saw the determined set of her jaw, a jaw that had squared off against landlords, bad bosses, and one particularly condescending ex-boyfriend on my behalf. I saw the flicker of genuine fear in her eyes, the fear of being found wanting by someone she might actually care about. And I knew, with a sinking, terrifying certainty, that I would do it. Because I was her friend. I was safe. I was the well-maintained hedge, and she needed a place to shelter from the storm in her own mind. Okay, I heard myself say, the word feeling foreign in my own mouth. Okay, one calibration. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and fragile. The quiet of my apartment pressed in, amplifying the sound of our breathing. This was no longer my predictable Tuesday night. This was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something that might, after a year of dormancy, finally make something grow. She nodded, a quick, jerky motion, as if she were surprised I'd agreed. Okay, good, great. She didn't look great. She looked like she was about to face a firing squad. She ran a hand through her messy bun, pulling a few dark strands loose. So, how does this work? Is there like a syllabus? A small, genuine smile touched my lips. I don't think a syllabus is required for a pass/fail course. My attempt at levity did little to dispel the electric current that had started to hum between us. My living room, usually a sanctuary of beige and quiet, felt like a stage, the lights hot, the audience holding its breath. Right? No syllabus. She took another deep breath and squared her shoulders, the way she did before a difficult client meeting. Should we sit down? Probably a good idea. I agreed, my voice a little hoarse. We moved to the couch in a strange, stilted synchronicity, leaving a careful, almost comical amount of space between us. The gray fabric of the cushions suddenly felt like a vast, uncharted territory. I could smell her shampoo, something clean and green, like crushed mint leaves after a rain. It was a scent I knew as well as my own, but tonight it felt new, foreign, and intoxicating. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the quiet hum of the refrigerator. This was Maya, my best friend, the person I'd called when my car broke down, the person who'd brought me soup when I had the flu, the person who knew I hated cilantro with a fiery passion. And I was about to kiss her. Clinically, as a favor. The absurdity of it was staggering. "Okay, Professor Vance," she said, her attempt at a joke thin and brittle. "What's the first lesson?" Chapter 1. The Fundamentals. My mind went blank. All my carefully constructed logic, my ability to break down complex systems into manageable parts, had deserted me. I was just a man sitting on a couch next to a woman who had somehow turned my entire world on its axis with a single, insane request. I think I started clearing my throat. The first thing is to stop thinking of it as a lesson. My own advice sounded hollow. I was thinking about it so hard my teeth ached. "You said you wanted to get out of your head. So let's start there." "Get out of my head," she repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. "Easier said than done." "Try this," I said, improvising, grasping for any semblance of control. "Close your eyes." She hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then her eyelids fluttered shut. Without the intensity of her gaze, I could study her face more freely. The slight tension in her brow, the way her lips were pressed together in a thin, nervous line. She was trying so hard to be brave, and it made my chest ache. "Now, just breathe," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "Focus on that. The sound of it. In and out." I watched her chest rise and fall. One breath. Two. The frantic energy that always surrounded her began to recede, replaced by a fragile calm. The tension in her shoulders eased. Her lips parted slightly. My own breathing had hitched. My carefully constructed safe friend persona was cracking at the seams. "The point," I continued, my voice a low murmur, "is that it's not a performance. There's no grading rubric. It's a conversation. Without words, God, I sounded like a bad romance novel. My inner monologue was screaming at me for being a pretentious idiot. A conversation without words? Just kiss her, you moron. "A conversation," she whispered, her eyes still closed. "Exactly. And you can't have a conversation if you're busy writing a script in your head." I shifted slightly on the couch, closing the distance between us by a few inches. The air grew warmer. "It's about reacting, responding." I reached out, my hand moving with a will of its own, and gently cupped her jaw. Her skin was soft, warm. She flinched almost imperceptibly at my touch, a tiny, reflexive movement, and then leaned into it, a silent surrender. My thumb brushed against her cheek, and I felt a tremor go through her. Or maybe it was me. I couldn't tell. The world had shrunk to the space between our faces. The ticking clock on the wall, the distant hum of traffic, it all faded into a dull, background roar. All I could hear was the frantic beat of my own blood in my ears. "Okay," I whispered. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Her eyes remained closed. This was the point of no return. I leaned in, my movements slow, deliberate, giving her every possible chance to pull away, to stop this madness. She didn't move. I could feel her breath on my lips, warm and sweet. The clinical detachment I had promised myself, the safe friend buffer, evaporated in a flash of heat. This wasn't a favor. This wasn't practice. This was a confession. My lips met hers. It was gentle at first, a soft, tentative question. For a heartbeat, she was still, and a cold wave of panic washed over me. I had misread everything. This was a colossal mistake. And then she answered. Her lips softened against mine, a quiet response that sent a jolt straight through my system. Her hand, which had been resting limply in her lap, came up to rest on my chest, right over my heart. She could feel it, I was sure of it, the wild, chaotic rhythm that betrayed every calm, measured word I'd spoken. The lesson was forgotten. The pretense of it all burned away, leaving something raw and real in its place. I deepened the kiss, a silent expression of all the things I'd never had the courage to say. It was a conversation, all right, and it was a conversation we had apparently been waiting years to have. It spoke of late-night phone calls, of inside jokes, of shared grief and quiet companionship. It was a kiss that tasted of familiarity and, terrifyingly, of something brand new. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. I rested my forehead against hers, my eyes still closed. I didn't dare open them, afraid of what I would see in her expression, afraid of what she would see in mine. The silence that followed was more intimate than the kiss itself. "Oh," she breathed, her voice shaky. It was a small, fragile sound. "Yeah," I managed to say, my own voice rough. She pulled back slowly. I forced myself to open my eyes. The doubt and fear were gone from her face, replaced by a look of dazed, wondering confusion. Her lips were slightly swollen, her cheeks flushed. "So," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "the calibration. I think it's complete. I think it might be." I agreed, my mind still reeling. She stared at me for a long moment, her brown eyes searching my face, and I felt utterly exposed, as if she could see every secret I'd ever kept, every hope I'd buried. Then a slow, devastatingly beautiful smile spread across her face. "You know," she said, her voice regaining a sliver of its usual teasing lilt, "I'm not sure. I think we might need more practice." The days that followed were a strange, delicate dance. We didn't talk about what had happened. We didn't define it. Instead, we fell into a new rhythm, one punctuated by these moments of practice. It became our secret language, a joke that was not a joke at all. She would come over after work, a bottle of wine in hand, and we'd sit on the couch and talk, just like we always had. But now, there was a low-level hum of electricity beneath the surface of our easy friendship. An awareness. My apartment, once a sterile fortress, now felt charged, alive with possibility. "I'm worried about the quarterly review presentation tomorrow," she'd say, chewing on her lower lip. "I think my confidence metrics are trending downwards." A clear lack of preparation. I'd respond, my tone serious. "We should probably run some drills." And we would. The drills would start with a soft, questioning kiss and deepen into something that left us both breathless and dizzy. Each time was different. Sometimes it was slow and tender, a quiet exploration. Other times it was hungry, urgent, a release of all the tension that had been building between us for years. We were mapping new territory, a landscape that looked tantalizingly like our old friendship, but felt entirely new. I was living a double life. By day, I was Leo Vance, supervisor of irrigation systems, a man who found comfort in spreadsheets and predictable outcomes. By night, I was something else, someone who was learning the topography of Maya's lips, the exact sound of her sigh when I tangled my hand in her hair. I was terrified, and I had never felt more alive. My carefully constructed walls were crumbling, and I was doing nothing to stop it. The voice of Chloe, the ghost of my past, was getting fainter. The label of boring and safe didn't seem to fit anymore. Or maybe it did, but Maya had found a different way to define it. To her, my steadiness wasn't a flaw, it was an anchor. A week after the first lesson, we found ourselves at a barbecue hosted by mutual friends, Mark and Sarah. It was the first time we'd been around our social circle since our dynamic had shifted. I was hyper-aware of her, of the space between us. I watched her laugh at something Mark said, the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, and felt a possessive pang that was so sharp and unfamiliar it startled me. We were standing by the drink cooler, a small oasis of relative quiet in the bustling backyard, when Chloe appeared. I hadn't seen her in months, not since she'd collected the last of her things from my apartment. She was with a new guy, someone with a man bun and a t-shirt that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Leo," she said, her voice dripping with that particular brand of sweet condescension she had perfected. "So good to see you." Her eyes flicked from me to Maya, who was standing beside me, and a small, knowing smile played on her lips. "And Maya, how are you?" "I'm great, Chloe," Maya said, her tone perfectly level. Maya had never been Chloe's biggest fan, a fact she made no effort to hide. "I see you two are still joined at the hip," Chloe continued, her gaze lingering on us. "It's so sweet. Leo is just the most reliable friend a girl could have, isn't he? So dependable." She loaded the word with pity, turning my best qualities into a consolation prize. It was the same old script. the one that used to make me shrink. I felt the old shame, the familiar sting of being defined as the safe option, the boring boxwood hedge. I saw Maya's jaw tighten, a barely perceptible shift, but I knew she was about to go on the defensive for me. But this time, something different happened. The person who answered wasn't the old Leo. It was the Leo who had spent the last week rediscovering his own pulse. I smiled, a calm, easy smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. I took the cup from Maya's hand and set it on the cooler, then casually draped my arm over her shoulders, pulling her flush against my side. It was a gesture of casual intimacy, a public declaration we had never made before. Maya stiffened in surprise for a fraction of a second before relaxing into my hold, leaning against me as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He is dependable," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the small space. I looked directly at Chloe, my gaze unwavering. "He's the guy you call when your car breaks down in the middle of the night. He's the guy who will build your ridiculously complicated IKEA furniture without complaining. And he's the guy who gets to spend his evenings with his best friend." I squeezed Maya's shoulder gently. "So yeah, I'd say dependable is working out pretty well for me." The air crackled. Chloe's perfect smile faltered, a small crack in her polished facade. She had expected me to be flustered, to retreat into my shell. She wasn't prepared for this calm, confident defense. My man bun-clad replacement looked awkwardly at his shoes. "Well," Chloe said, recovering quickly, "that's nice." The word was stripped of all its meaning. She gave a tight little wave and steered her boyfriend away towards the grill, leaving us in the sudden quiet. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My arm was still around Maya. I should probably move it. I made no effort to. She tilted her head to look up at me, her expression unreadable. The sounds of the party, the laughter and the sizzle of burgers, seemed to fade away. It was just us, standing in our own little bubble of charged air. "So," she said, her voice low, "IKEA furniture, huh? That's your big move." "I'm a man of many talents," I replied, my heart still beating a little too fast. "And I'm excellent with a hex key." She didn't smile. She just kept looking at me, her eyes searching my face with that unnerving intensity. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. "You know," she said, her voice barely a whisper, so quiet I had to lean down to hear her. "Chloe always said you were quiet." She was wrong. My breath caught in my throat. "You're not quiet," Maya continued, her gaze unwavering. "You're deliberate. You wait. You listen. And you don't waste words. But when you do decide to say something, it matters." And there it was, the moment of being seen. She hadn't just defended me. She had defined me. She had taken the very quality my ex had used as a weapon against me and reframed it, not as a weakness, but as a strength. She saw the thought behind my silence, the intention behind my reserve. In that single observation, she dismantled years of insecurity brick by brick. She didn't just see the well-maintained hedge. She saw the deep, strong roots holding it in place. I couldn't speak. All the witty retorts, all the carefully constructed defenses failed me. I just stared down at her, a wave of emotion so powerful it threatened to pull me under. It was more than attraction, more than friendship. It was recognition, a feeling of coming home to a place I hadn't even known I was searching for. My arm tightened around her, a reflexive, involuntary movement. I wanted to kiss her right there in the middle of the party with the smell of charcoal and cut grass in the air. I wanted to show her, in the only way I seemed to be able to lately, what her words meant to me. But I didn't, because this was too important. This moment was fragile, sacred. It needed to be protected from prying eyes and the inevitable questions that would follow. So instead, I just held her, my thumb tracing small, absent-minded circles on her shoulder. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel safe or boring or settled. I felt seen, and it was everything. The rest of the party passed in a blur. We drifted back into the flow of conversation, but the invisible tether between us remained, taut and humming. We were a unit, a silent conspiracy of two. Every shared glance across the crowded lawn, Every time our hands brushed as we reached for the same platter of food was a secret message. The world had shifted, and only we knew it. Later that night, after we'd said our goodbyes and made our escape, the silence in my car was thick and heavy, but not uncomfortable. It was a contemplative quiet, the kind that follows a storm. I drove, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, replaying her words over and over in my head. You're not quiet. You're deliberate. When I pulled up to her apartment building, I put the car in park but didn't cut the engine. The dashboard lights cast a soft, green glow over her face. Thank you, I said, breaking the silence. For what you said. Back there. She turned to face me, her expression serious. I just told the truth, Leo. It's not my fault other people are bad listeners. The simplicity of it, the absolute certainty in her voice, undid me all over again. Before I could stop myself, before my cautious, overthinking brain could veto the impulse, I leaned across the center console. She met me halfway. The kiss was different this time. It wasn't practice. It wasn't a drill. There was no pretense, no joke to hide behind. It was raw and honest, and full of the afternoon's unspoken emotions. It was a thank you. It was a confirmation. It was the sound of a final wall crumbling to dust. We stayed like that for a long moment, lost in the small, self-contained world of my car, until the headlights of another vehicle pulling into the lot washed over us, breaking the spell. We pulled apart, both of us slightly dazed. I should go, she said, her voice husky. Yeah, I said, not wanting her to go at all. She reached for the door handle, then paused, her hand hovering in the air. She looked at me, a question in her eyes. It was a question about what this was, where it was going, what we were doing. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the answer. But before either of us could voice it, the universe decided to complicate things. We were having coffee a few days later at a small cafe halfway between my work and her apartment. It was becoming our spot. The air was filled with the rich, dark scent of roasting beans and the low murmur of conversation. We were sitting at a small table by the window, the morning sun slanting across the worn wooden floor. Maya was telling me an animated story about a client who wanted her to design a logo using a font that looked more purple. I was laughing, completely engrossed in the way her eyes lit up when she was exasperated, when a shadow fell over our table. Maya, I thought that was you. The voice was smooth, confident, and utterly unwelcome. It was Julian. He stood there, clad in a perfectly tailored blazer that probably cost more than my car, a practiced, easy smile on his face. He looked like the villain in a movie about corporate takeovers. He completely ignored me, his entire focus lasered in on Maya. Maya's smile vanished. Her posture, which had been open and relaxed, instantly became rigid. It was like watching a flower close up against a coming frost. Julian, she said, her voice cool and devoid of any warmth. What are you doing here? Grabbing my morning caffeine fix, he said, gesturing vaguely towards the counter. Fancy seeing you here. It's been a while. He let his gaze drift over to me, a flicker of dismissive assessment in his eyes before he turned his attention back to her. And you are with Leo, I said, my voice flat. I didn't offer to shake his hand. Leo, Julian repeated, tasting the name as if it were cheap wine. The friend. He pulled up a chair from a neighboring table and sat down without being invited, his movements fluid and proprietary. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on our small table, effectively cutting me out of the conversation. So, how have you been, May? You look good. A little tired, maybe. It was his classic move. The compliment followed by the subtle critique. The implication that she was somehow less vibrant without him. I felt a low growl of anger build in my chest. I'm not tired, Julian. I'm busy, Maya said, her tone sharp. And it's Maya. He chuckled, a low, patronizing sound. Always so feisty. I missed that. He looked around the cafe, a disdainful curl to his lip. This is a new spot for you. A little. Rustic, isn't it? We like it, I said, my voice firm. He finally turned his head to look at me, his eyes cold. I'm sure you do, he said, the insult hanging unspoken in the air. He turned back to Maya, his voice softening into a persuasive purr. Listen, I was actually thinking about you the other day. Remember that gallery opening in the city next Friday? The one we always used to go to? I was thinking you and I should go. For old time's sake. It wasn't a question. It was a summons. He was reasserting his claim, try to pull her back into their old orbit right in front of me. He was making it clear that he saw me as a temporary placeholder, a non-threat, the dependable friend. I watched Maya. I saw the flicker of old patterns, the instinct to appease, to smooth things over. It was a testament to his insidious brand of control that, even now, she felt a sliver of that old pressure. But then she took a breath. She sat up straighter. She looked him directly in the eye, and the woman who had faced down Chloe at the barbecue, the woman who had called me deliberate, was back in full force. "No, thank you, Julian," she said, her voice clear and steady. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just a simple, unshakable statement of fact. His smile tightened at the edges. He wasn't used to being told no so plainly. "Don't be like that, May. It'll be fun. We'll have dinner at our old spot." "There's no our old spot anymore," she cut in, her voice like ice. "You and I are in the past. A past I have no interest in revisiting." She reached across the table, and, in a move that shocked both Julian and me, she placed her hand directly on top of mine. Her fingers laced with mine, a warm, firm anchor in the sudden cold. "Leo is my present, and my future, if he'll have me." The last part was said with a quick, almost shy glance in my direction before her gaze snapped back to Julian, hard as steel. The silence that followed was absolute. The background noise of the cafe seemed to vanish. Julian stared at our joined hands on the table, the color draining from his face. He had come here to undermine me, to reestablish his dominance. And in one sentence, Maya had not only rejected him completely, she had elevated our undefined thing into something solid, something real. She had drawn a line in the sand and dared him to cross it. He was a man who valued appearances above all else, and he had just been publicly, unequivocally shut down. He stood up abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Fine," he snapped, his smooth facade finally cracking. "Have fun with your project." He spat the word at me, then turned and strode out of the cafe without a backward glance. The moment he was gone, it was like the air pressure in the room returned to normal. I looked down at our hands, still clasped together on the tabletop. Her skin was warm against mine. My heart was doing a frantic, joyful tap dance against my ribs. "And my future, if he'll have me." I looked up at her. She was watching me, her expression a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. She had just laid all her cards on the table, not for me in a private, safe moment, but in front of the one person designed to make her feel small. She had defended us. She had chosen us. The stakes were no longer theoretical. The game of practice was officially over. I squeezed her hand. "Just so we're clear," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "I'll have you." A slow, brilliant smile spread across her face, chasing away the last of the tension. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The aftermath of the confrontation hung in the air, but it wasn't a cloud of awkwardness. It was a space of pure, unadulterated clarity. We had faced our first real test, not as two friends playing a game, but as a unit, and we hadn't buckled. We left the coffee shop a few minutes later, our hands still linked. The world outside seemed brighter, the colors more vivid. We walked in a comfortable silence, the unspoken questions between us no longer feeling like a weight, but like a promise. That evening, she came over to my apartment. There was no pretense of casual drop-in. We both knew this was different. The air was charged with a new kind of energy, the quiet hum of a decision made. We didn't turn on the television. We didn't make small talk. We just stood in the middle of my living room, the same room where this whole insane, wonderful journey had begun, and looked at each other. I could see the faint traces of her confrontation with Julian in the slight tension around her eyes. She had been brave, but bravery takes its toll. I reached out and tucked a stray piece of hair behind her ear, my fingers lingering on the softness of her skin. You were amazing today, I said, my voice low. He's a condescending fossil, she replied, a flash of her usual fire in her eyes. I should have stood up to him like that years ago. You stood up to him when it mattered, I said. You stood up for us. The word us hung in the air between us, shimmering and new. It was a word we hadn't dared to use before, but now it felt like the only word that fit. She looked down at the floor, then back up at me, her gaze direct and piercing. This was it, the moment of truth. She was never one to leave things unsaid, to let ambiguity fester. So, she said, her voice soft but firm, stripping away all artifice. Are we going to keep calling this practice, Leo? The question was a key turning in a lock. It was an invitation to step out from behind the safety of our joke, to abandon the caution that had defined my life for so long. It was a direct challenge to the man Chloe thought I was, and a confirmation of the man Maya knew I could be. My heart hammered against my ribs, but for the first time, it wasn't a rhythm of anxiety. It was a rhythm of anticipation. No, I said, my voice clear and steady. I took her other hand, holding both of them in mine. It stopped being practice about 10 seconds into that first kiss. A small, shaky breath escaped her lips. I continued, the words I've been holding back for weeks, for years, finally spilling out. It stopped being practice for me a long time before that. I just didn't have the courage to admit it. I looked into her eyes, wanting her to see the absolute truth of what I was saying. It's not just about the kissing, Maya. It's you. It's the way you challenge me. It's the way you make a room brighter just by walking into it. It's the fact that you see me. Not the safe version or the quiet version. Just me. And I've been falling in love with that person, with you, for a very long time. Tears welled in her eyes, shimmering in the soft light of a lamp. She didn't try to hide them. One escaped and traced a glistening path down her cheek. I reached up and gently wiped it away with my thumb. It took Julian being critical of my kissing to make me realize I wanted to kiss you, she whispered, a watery laugh catching in her throat. And it took Chloe being critical of your silence to make me realize how much I loved listening to it. My carefully controlled world tilted and then settled, finding a new, more perfect center. Her. It had always been her. I leaned in and captured her lips with mine. This kiss was the culmination of everything. It held the awkwardness of our first lesson, the fierceness of her defense at the coffee shop, the quiet intimacy of a decade of friendship, and the blazing promise of a future. It was not a lesson, not a drill, not a thank you. It was a declaration, a vow. When we broke apart, the world felt brand new. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound and peaceful certainty. For the record, I murmured against her lips. Julian was an idiot. You're a phenomenal kisser. She laughed, a real, full-throated laugh that filled the quiet of my apartment. Well, I had a good teacher. I think, I said, pulling her closer. We still need a lot more practice. I think you're right, she agreed, her eyes sparkling. And this time, we both knew exactly what it meant. The next Saturday, I told her I was taking her on our first real date. No more hiding behind jokes or semantics. This was us, out in the open. Where are we going? She asked, a playful curiosity in her voice as I drove. It's a surprise, I said, enjoying the rare opportunity to be the mysterious one. I didn't take her to a fancy restaurant or a trendy bar. I took her to my world. I used my master key to unlock the main gate of the Verdant Valley Botanical Gardens long after it had closed to the public. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows across the manicured lawns. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth, night-blooming jasmine, and contentment. Leo, she breathed, her eyes wide as she took in the empty, silent park. This is magical. This is my office, I said with a smile. Welcome. We walked the deserted pathways, our footsteps echoing softly in the twilight. I showed her my favorite spots, a secluded bench hidden behind a curtain of weeping willow, a grove of Japanese maples whose leaves were just beginning to turn a fiery crimson. I took her into the main conservatory, the great glass cathedral that housed the tropical collection. Inside, the air was warm, thick, and humid. The sound of the misters hissed softly and the scent of orchids and wet soil was intoxicating. The fading sunlight filtered through the glass panes, dappling the broad, waxy leaves of the monstera plants in shifting patterns of light and shadow. "This is what Chloe called boring," I said quietly, gesturing to the lush, vibrant life all around us. "Schedules, maintenance, predictability." Maya reached out and touched the velvety petal of a deep purple orchid. "She didn't see it right," she said, her voice soft. "This isn't boring, Leo. This is devotion. It's taking care of something beautiful. It's nurturing growth. It's creating a world where things can thrive." She turned to face me, her eyes shining in the dim light. "That's not boring. That's everything." We stood there in the heart of my quiet, predictable world, and I showed her the magic she had already seen in me. We talked for hours, sitting on a stone bench, surrounded by giant ferns that looked like something out of a prehistoric age. I told her about the wound Chloe had left, the lingering fear that I was fundamentally not enough, not exciting enough for anyone to build a life with. I told her how her belief in me, her perception, had started to heal that wound long before I even knew it. She told me about Julian, about how his constant criticism had been a slow poison, making her doubt her own instincts, her own worth. She confessed that her request for practice had been born not just of insecurity, but of a desperate need to feel something real, something honest, after 2 years of carefully manufactured affection. It was a subconscious attempt to connect with the one person she knew would never try to change her, only to understand her. We laid our old ghosts to rest there, in the warm, living air of the conservatory. We built a new foundation, not on the ruins of our pasts, but on the solid ground of our shared present. As we were leaving, I stopped her under the enormous, domed glass ceiling. The first stars were beginning to appear in the deep indigo sky above us. "I love you, Maya," I said. The words felt as natural as breathing. "I love you too, Leo," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I have for a long, long time." The integration of our lives after that was seamless, as if we were two rivers flowing into one another. It wasn't a series of grand gestures, but a collection of small, quiet moments that built the bedrock of our life together. Her favorite coffee mug, a bright yellow one with a chipped rim, found a permanent home on the front hook of my mug tree. My spice rack, once a lonely collection of salt, pepper, and expired paprika, was soon overflowing with the exotic spices she used in her cooking. My minimalist apartment began to show signs of life, of her. A colorful throw blanket appeared on the back of the couch. A stack of art books materialized on the coffee table. My beige sanctuary was slowly, beautifully, being infused with color. I started leaving a toothbrush at her place. She started keeping a pair of ridiculously comfortable sweatpants at mine. We didn't have a conversation about it. It just happened. Our lives were braiding themselves together, strand by quiet strand. We learned the rhythms of each other's days. I knew she needed a full 10 minutes of silence in the morning before her first cup of coffee. She learned that I hummed, slightly off-key, when I was concentrating on fixing something. We fell into an easy domesticity that felt less like a new routine and more like a return to a place we were always meant to be. Our witty banter was still there, the playful teasing that was the hallmark of our friendship, but now it was layered with a deep, abiding tenderness. We were still best friends, but now we were more. 2 years later, the apartment looked different now. It was our apartment. My minimalist tendencies had been happily overrun by Maya's vibrant aesthetic. A large, abstract painting she'd done hung on the main wall, a riot of blues and golds that made the whole room feel alive. The beige couch was gone, replaced by a deep teal sectional big enough for us both to sprawl on, which we were currently doing. A scruffy terrier mix named Gus, whom we'd adopted from the shelter where kind-eyed Mark volunteered, was snoring softly on the rug between us. Mark, it turned out, had found love with a veterinarian, a development we both celebrated. We had built a life here, in this space that was once just mine. We'd hosted dinner parties, weathered bad colds, and assembled an astonishing amount of IKEA furniture together. My world was no longer quiet, no longer sterile. It was loud and messy and colorful, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. Maya was curled up at one end of the couch, her laptop balanced on her knees, a frown of concentration on her face. She was preparing a major pitch for a new client, a national campaign that could be a huge step for her career. The presentation was tomorrow morning. She let out a frustrated sigh and snapped the laptop shut. "It's no good," she said, slumping back against the cushions. "I'm in my own head. I'm going to walk in there tomorrow and completely forget how to speak English." I put down my book and looked at her. The same nervous energy I'd seen in her that very first night was flickering around her edges. The same flicker of self-doubt. But this time it was different. This time, she wasn't alone with it. I smiled a slow, easy smile. "Sounds serious," I said, my voice grave. "Confidence metrics are trending downwards again." Her head snapped up, and she looked at me. The worry in her eyes was replaced by a familiar, playful spark. She knew exactly where this was going. "It's a catastrophe," she agreed, her tone just as serious. "A level 4 at least. I think I might need some practice." I pushed myself up and moved across the couch, closing the distance between us. I gently took the laptop from her lap and set it on the floor. Gus the dog opened one eye, gave a grunt of disapproval at the disturbance, and went back to sleep. I cupped her face in my hands, just as I had that first time. Her skin was just as soft, her eyes just as beautiful. But the fear and uncertainty that had been there 2 years ago were gone, replaced by a deep, unshakable love and trust. "Well," I said, my voice a low murmur, "I'm a very experienced instructor." I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't the tentative exploration of our first kiss or the desperate confession of our first real one. It was a kiss of deep, comfortable intimacy. It tasted of shared coffee and inside jokes, of lazy Sunday mornings and unwavering support. It was a conversation that had been going on for 2 years, a conversation that spoke of devotion and growth and a love that had been hiding in plain sight all along. As I held her, tangled together on our couch in the middle of our messy, wonderful life, a final, clear thought settled in my mind. She had come to me asking me to teach her how to kiss. But what she had really done, with her wit and her strength and her incredible, unwavering ability to see the man I was meant to be, was teach me how to live. And for that, I will be practicing my gratitude for the rest of my days. Have you ever had a friendship that turned into something more? That one person who saw you more clearly than anyone else, even when you couldn't see yourself? Tell me your story in the comments. I'd love to read it. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next.